Okay, well, we're ready to begin now. This is Frank Salatis, and I hope you'll enjoy our presentation today. This is, again, part of the series of webinars in connection with promoting International Project Management Day, which happens to be the 7th of November this year. Just a very quick reminder about what International Project Management Day is about. It is simply a day to recognize the project managers in every field, every industry, every type of project, construction, software development, IT, entertainment, aerospace, oil and gas, all those different industries. The idea behind International Project Management Day is simply to say thank you, that you do a lot of work. I always kind of think of project management as more or less the unappreciated profession. A lot of people don't understand the amount of work that goes into managing a project, regardless of size. So International Project Management Day is really a day for you. If you are interested in preparing some type of an event, if you would post your information at the website www.internationalprojectmanagementday.org. That's internationalpmday.org. We'd like to hear about what you're doing. I've been receiving information from people around the world that are planning events just about everywhere, including virtual events, coffee breaks, formal conferences, and so on. So if there's something that you're planning to do for that day, share that information with us. We'd really like to know exactly what you're doing and how you're honoring project managers who are working so hard to do the many things that we enjoy in life every day. Our speaker today, Peter Heinrich, is the president and CEO of Portfolio Decisionware. I think we know it as PDware. I got to meet Peter and his associates a little over a year ago at a conference in Chicago. Well, not actually, the conference in Chicago was only a few months ago, but this was all about resource planning, and it was very interesting to see their product and to be there and listening to a lot of people talking about the challenges and the potential solutions of resource planning and portfolio management. So in discussions with Peter and his organization, we thought it would be a good idea for you to listen to a possible solution about resource planning, about portfolio management. So Peter will give you some of his insight about that, and also do a little demonstration about the product that they have developed that seems to be making a big difference in many organizations. So as we begin here, what I'll do is I'm going to transfer the program over to Peter. Now I'm a novice at the webinar process here, so I need to make some adjustments here and make sure that I'm doing this correct. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to change my presenter to Peter, and Peter will then put up his screen, and he will introduce himself, and we will begin the process. Okay, so Peter.
Okay. So am I live? Am I live?
Yes, you are.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. I'm very glad to have the opportunity to present a view about an important new process, resource planning, which actually isn't new at all. I'll say more about that later. As Frank said, I'm the president and CEO of Portfolio Decisionware, or PDware. We're based in New York City, and we are a software vendor in this space. So we support portfolio management and resource planning for organizations really of all sizes, ranging from a few hundred people to 20 or 30,000. So before I get into the resource planning notion, let me give you a little bit of my history. I started many years ago as a software developer for Xerox out on the West Coast. And I had had no training whatsoever in project management, and I'd actually had no training in software development. At that time, they were hiring people who had credible backgrounds. And progressed and became a manager in the software and systems organization, and then finally a director, department director, and was then responsible for planning of various kinds, like planning releases of products. And in the 80s, I left Xerox and with some colleagues started a project management consulting and training company called Integrated Project Systems, which has become IPS Learning. They have an advanced project management course at Stanford University and so forth. And so we started that organization in the late 80s. And through the 90s, I was out there. I had, by that time, learned project management and was tremendously excited about it. And I remain excited about it. But the problem was that we would do a great job of teaching project management within organizations, but the organization as a whole would continue to have grave difficulty in executing. And I came to see that there was a problem that went across projects. It was not simply a matter of planning and managing an individual project better. It was a problem of making decisions about the whole set of projects that an organization is trying to undertake. So that's where this notion came from. So let me start into this slide presentation, and then I'll talk more about the background and the context for the stuff. So the first thing that we realized when we encountered all those problems is that resource planning is a different thing from project planning and project management. You don't get resource planning by collecting a whole bunch of individual project plans. So you can do 100% right in terms of the definition of project management, and an organization will still be having problems. So resource planning is needed, and because without it, these terrible decisions are made. And the type of solution, it turns out, also matters. Because if the solution is too complex, the solution is rejected by the people who have to feed it. And if the data are not credible, the system will then fall into disuse. So the next thing you have after disuse of one system is the next solution du jour. And that is really a downer for most people. I talked to many people in organizations who say, okay, we've been here before, why is this different? So what's the problem? The problem is manifested at various levels and at various roles in the organization. And I'm giving you now quotes that I have heard repeatedly over my career. And I first started capturing these quotes in the 90s, and literally I still hear them today. So the project manager, what's the problem for the project manager? We go through a phase gate review, we get approval of a plan for a project. I know what I'm supposed to deliver, but I also know what resources I'm supposed to be getting at the next stage and the stage after that and so on. And what happens? I get to the next stage and I'm not getting the resources that were committed to me. So my project is in trouble and I get blamed. From the point of view of a resource manager, and by the way, when I say resource manager, I mean a line or functional manager who has people directly reporting to him or her. So the resource managers complain, and still do. Management doesn't set priorities. They're always asking us to do more. They don't think about what we're currently working on. They just say, oh, we can start another project. And conversely, at phase gates, even though a project team may have done an outstanding job of doing a project plan, they get into a meeting, a phase gate meeting, and the resource managers who may not have been heavily involved in the resource planning for the project will say, that's not my plan. So you have a disconnect right there at your phase gates. And then finally, the senior management team has a whole set of problems, and I literally have heard this statement here. I don't have a clue what people are working on. I heard this last week at a very, very large financial institution that's using our product. And they said this in the context of saying that our product was solving this particular problem for them. But I don't have a clue what people are working on in my organization. I've got all these people, but you know, we start all kinds of projects, but we have trouble finishing them. And of course, this is a common mistake that is made. After all, it only takes one person to start a project, to be the initial staff. But if that project requires 10 or 100 people in 3 months, and you start 100 of them, all of a sudden you don't have enough resources when they're needed to finish all the projects on time. I can't tell if our resources are focused on our high priority projects. In fact, I know in some cases they aren't. When a project slips, we can't see what other projects are affected until those projects get in trouble later. If you have a high priority project that was supposed to shed resources next month, and those resources were going to work on another set of projects, you might not notice how badly they are impacted if you're not looking in a rational and careful way. And finally, we staff revenue projects, but we ignore critical infrastructure requirements. So this is a problem set that we encountered in the 90s, and we're still seeing it and hearing about it today. So here's the set of questions you want to be able to answer with respect to managing a portfolio of projects. Should we do this project or this set of projects? So that's the benefit, cost, and contribution analysis. Are these worth doing? Are they critical to be done? Are they mandatory? And so on. The second question, can we? And this is your capability supply-demand analysis. Not only do you have the right number of people to staff the projects for the project lifetime, but do you have the right skill sets? You might have enough people, but you might not have enough DBAs or EEs or testers or whatever. Third, how are we doing? So keeping track along the way, capturing status and measuring against expectations. Then did we, after the fact, being able to go back and look at the plans, the intermediate status, the results, to see how you did against those expectations and plans. And then how do we improve? Obviously, if you don't have that data, you have very little basis for making improvements. So the capturing of the data allows you to develop metrics that help you improve. So these are all critical things. Now, I said I'd give you some of my history. Here is literally, this is a resource plan that I did many, many, many years ago. And I have my people on the left-hand side, and then I wrote down the projects that they were working on. And by period, I put in how much time each of them was going to be needed on these projects. And this planning methodology for resource planning is still in use today, even though it doesn't use graph paper the way I was doing it. People do this in Excel. And what we find, and this is consistent, it's been consistent for 30 years now, is that despite the presence of very, very high quality project management and scheduling tools of all varieties, from very simple to very large and complex, resource managers, line functional managers, are still managing their, some of them call it their resource checkbook, their allocation of people to projects with Excel. So this is a common environment. Now the portfolio management framework, as we see it, starts from the strategic portfolio management. That is, some level of executive management is making a decision about what product lines you're in, what's the financial model, and so on. And they are really not involved with projects per se, usually. But they are the source for having funding that allows projects to be initiated. So what do we need for the portfolio management is we need project planning. So what's the project plan, what's it going to deliver, and so forth. The other thing we know we need is portfolio planning. Someone has to take that strategy that the senior executives have laid out and say, is this portfolio, this set of projects, aligned to that strategy? They have to answer those questions I talked about before. Is this portfolio achievable given the resources and skills that we can deploy? And are our resources deployed according to that strategy? But this picture right here is an unbalanced picture. Most organizations have these elements in place. And what they're missing is the line functional management, the resource planning component. And this is literally something different, and it's done by different people. It's done by the line functional management. And this group of people and this function has to be responsible for the utilization of the resources and the allocation of them to projects. And they're the ones who understand resource demand and resource supply. And then finally, you need some form of tracking, and it doesn't necessarily have to be extremely detailed timesheets, but it can be. But that is how you sort of understand what you've done and whether you're accomplishing your goals. And in our view, this segment at the bottom here, this 4-element segment, is the operational portfolio management context for what we're talking about. Now, I said before this is a new but not so new methodology and topic. This is one of my favorite slides. This I got out of an Egyptian website where they literally, the builders of the pyramids, had an organization breakdown structure that is diagrammed just like this with the hieroglyphics and so on. And without my big black arrows and so forth. Each dot at the bottom represents 20 men. And as you go up the pyramid, you can see how many people are in each of the units that make this thing up. Now, my point in showing this is twofold. One is to say resource planning is as old as large-scale activities and efforts conducted by human beings. So there's some form of resource planning, and it's been quite stable in some senses. But there is a problem with communication. And in most modern organizations, if you have a hierarchical communication mechanism represented by my big bold arrows, where the individual group leader at the bottom for each dot reports up to his manager, and then those managers report up to their manager and so on up to the top, you have a flood of detailed data that is not very usable and not very useful. And there's all kinds of opportunity for miscommunication or for spin, not passing on bad news, and so forth. So these are very, very serious communication problems that modern technology can help solve. And our view of this is there needs to be a set of tools in which the data is collected at the lowest and most credible level, and then the data and analysis are obtainable by anyone in the organization as it's needed. And so this is the model for the kind of tool solution you want to have. So summarizing, I'll give you some resource planning principles. You want to focus the attention of your decision makers on high impact issues. Resource skill supply demand issues are among the highest impact issues. We've seen surveys done by Bob Cooper of StageGate fame, and they surveyed 270 companies, and 70% of them self-identified as being very poor at resource supply-demand analysis. The analysis of resource skill supply demand requires fresh, credible data. If data is old and stale or not updated or is incorrect, no amount of analysis is going to lead to a good decision. And the best sources for the data are these first-level line or functional managers, the managers of individual contributors who get allocated to projects, because they're the ones who know the skills of those people. They also know what other things they're working on, what their capability and capacity is. And then the final major principle to keep in mind is capture history and use it. So there needs to be a mechanism for doing all of that. So with that, I'm going to switch over to our product platform. And let me just say a word or two about that. We have basically two forms of the product. One is a thin client, a browser-based version, which I am not going to show you. And the other is an Excel type client, actually Excel-based client, both of them interact with a relational database backend, either SQL Server or Oracle. And the basic idea is that we want data to be provided by and captured by the people who know best about that data. So what we're looking at here is a worksheet in a workbook, which is controlled by PDWare software. And we're looking at the project list. So this is the project portfolio for the unit we're looking at. And so you see the list of projects. And next to the projects, you see a priority, which is set somehow by the managers of the portfolio. And then there are a bunch of attributes about the project. For instance, this project is in product line A, and this project is part of product line B. And there are some other attributes, including schedule attributes and the budget and the current FTE count. And all of this information in here is really the responsibility of the project manager and of the portfolio manager. So some things are strictly the project manager, such as dates and the current overall health, the green, yellow, red indicators. But other things may be the responsibility not of the project manager, but of the senior management in the portfolio, for instance, the budget. Now, the other thing we need to do resource planning is we need resources. And those are listed here on the resource data sheet. And I'm currently modeling, if you will, the mechanical engineering organization. So I'm acting now as if I were the manager of the mechanical engineering organization. I've taken out my set of resources. So I have 5 people reporting to me who have a variety of skills. And there's this big organization skills matrix out here to the left. And if I, as the manager of Bill Brophy, want to say that Bill has, let's say, packaging skills, I can just come here and put an indicator in that cell that says he has packaging skills, and now I've registered that Bill is available for work that requires the packaging skill. Now, the next step in resource planning is for me as a functional or line manager to express how much effort is going to be required from my resources on some project. So I've been asked to support the new project, which has just been registered. It's in product line A. It doesn't have any resources on it yet, and I've been told that I'm to support that project. And it's going to be a long project. Maybe it's going to take 18 months or 2 years or something like that. But I know what I'm being asked to support is the first phase or two. So I'm going to go look at my resource utilization sheet or picture. And that's given, it's a sheet titled Resource Utilization. And what this is showing me is it's showing the total current demand for each resource divided by the resource's capacity. So if a person is available 1 FTE per month, 1 full-time, then if they have a demand of 1, this number here will be 100%. And if they have less demand than that, you'll have a lower percent. So in this case, Pat McCluskey in January has only 20% of his capacity identified as demand on a project. So that's availability. And conversely, if I have a resource that has a number of 115%, that means that 15% of his capacity is going to be essentially beyond his full-time level of availability. So if I'm asked to support a project, what I'm going to do is look in here and say, oh, well, this project is going to be going on for, let's say, February through April or May. And I see here that Joe Poteet has 60% availability, and I know that he's only going to be needed about 40% to meet the needs of this new project. So I can just right-click here and assign resources, and I will select New Project, Insert, and now I have an assignment with simply a row on my Excel spreadsheet of Joe on my new project, and all I have to do is come in here and say how much level of effort is required from Joe on this project, and I click and drag it for as many periods as necessary. So you can see that we're providing standard Excel functionality to be able to quickly express a requirement for a resource on a project. And given that we've done that, we can look at a picture of the demand on the project. So I'm going to now go to the project demand sheet, and as you can see, this is simply my list of all the projects in the portfolio, and I see New Project here at the bottom, and I can see that currently with what I'm looking at from my organization, Mechanical Engineering, the total demand on New Project for resources is 0.4 for this period. Now at that point, someone may have said to me, look, your job as a resource manager is to express how much effort is going to be required from your organization for the entire life cycle of the project. And if you see at the top, while we're selected on New Project at the bottom, you see the Gantt bar here at the top, which is showing what phase this project is supposed to be in at these various points in time. So I'm now going to insert an assignment, but not a resource assignment. I'm going to insert a skill assignment from my mechanical engineering organization, and I'm going to say that I am going to need someone with mechanical engineering skill, but not during the time that I've assigned Joe. It's for later phases. So we'll stick with 0.4 as the level of effort, and I'll just say that we will need mechanical engineering folks until the end of development. And now I've expressed my organization's demand profile for this project called New Project. And as you can see, where I had a resource that has availability, there's no color coding here, but where I put in a skill assignment, by definition there's no resource there to satisfy that demand, I see highlighting that indicates there's a shortfall, that a person hasn't been identified to support the needs of that project. Now, this is true for the mechanical engineering group. As you could see before, I had filtered down my view to just the view that an individual line manager has to deal with. So it's pretty simple for me as a line manager to take care of and keep this up to date and routinely on a month-by-month basis do a rolling 2, 3, 4-month forecast of any changes in demand. And by virtue of doing that, I give the organization a look ahead and an advance notice if there's going to be a problem. But I can also remove my filters and look at this from the point of view of the entire organization. So now I'm looking at this from across the entire organization, and I can see what the resource utilization picture is like. And also on the project demand, I'm looking at the entire organization. And I can see by calling on optimization, remember I said that on our resource utilization, the dark blue indicates less than full utilization. So 20%, 40%, 60%, and so on. So there are a lot of people with blue, and there's a lot of indication of problems here on the portfolio view. I can say, what if we used unused or available capacity wherever the skill matched the demand, and I can see that my portfolio is in much better shape than I have it as a planned named resource, that wherever there's skills, I can actually staff most of the requirement. And notice on new project, all of this down here at the bottom right was red, and it's telling me that I will have, at the time this project enters design phase, I will have enough staff to support that skill assignment, even though I don't know right now whose name is going to go in there, because Joe might be on some other project at that time. So that's the sort of basic notion about this resource planning idea, that you distribute to as low a level as possible in the organization the responsibility for capturing good, credible data about the use and allocation of resources. And the important and perhaps foreign notion to people who are exclusively from a project management perspective, the data here on the effort forecast where the assignments are, this data belongs to the functional line manager. This is the functional line manager's agreement or commitment to deliver this level of resource to the project when the resources are needed. So the way the project manager interacts with this is the project manager would, let's say, let's pick, I don't know, network upgrade here. So I'm going to do double-click drill down. So I'll double-click on a cell here in the data area, and this shows me all the assignments that are out there for this project. And it's showing me by color coding whether there are any issues with any of the assignments here. And you can see I have an issue with Dave Ferranti here, who is unable to supply the halftime demand that is called out. And that was my commitment as a manager, let's say. So I can double click again and see why he can't fully deliver all that. And I see a higher priority project has a requirement for 0.6. My project has 0.5. So I'm going to get 0.4 from this person, but I'm missing 0.1. At some other point in time, for instance out here in May, I need 0.5, but I'm only going to get 0.1. So this is a way for the project manager to see what the resource managers are saying about the allocation of resources to my project. Now, so that's the picture from the resource and line functional point of view. It's the picture from the project point of view. And so the way I would say this is that leading up to a phase gate, the project team does their planning. If it's a cross-functional team, you've got functional representatives. You send them back to their functions. You tell them to load the resource plan properly. And the project team does its thing and gets the data onto the project data sheet. And then before the phase gate review, the project manager comes in here and double-clicks and looks at this resource plan and sees that there are no highlighted problem areas, or if there are, that they are ones that he or she knows about and is prepared to deal with. If that is not the case, if there are large numbers of red highlighting in here, then as you go into the phase gate review, you better have identified a series of options that you're going to present to the management team to make a decision. So let's assume that we are the, what did I say? Oh yes, the network upgrade project. And we come in here and we see color highlighting, and we say the functional manager can't solve this problem. He doesn't have anybody on the bench who has availability. So what can we do? Well, we can present one option, which is we need to go out and get some contractors to fill this need. Or we need to hire a couple of people to fill this need. Or we need to de-scope the project somewhat so that the project doesn't need this level of effort. And then finally, we might be able to get these resources if we just delayed the project 4 months. So those options need to be presented to the management team when you go in with a problem set like this. So you've seen now there are 2 ways that this works. Basically, it works off the same functionality. The project manager looks at the resource plan. And if it's okay, you go into the phase gate review and you're clean. If it's not okay, you go in with alternatives, but you've been able to work them out in conjunction with all of the line functional managers who are involved on the project. Now, given that we have all of this great data, the PDWare solution provides a great deal of additional functionality. For instance, we can invoke a module from the toolbar up here, this happens to be called the project hierarchy module, and you can see that I've organized it by business unit and current state of the project. So here's product line A, and here are my approved projects, my proposed, and my suspended projects. And product line B just has approved and proposed projects. And I'm currently looking at a value which is the total cost for the project, which means it's the labor and non-labor cost. PDWare has financial capability as well. But out here in the data area, I can look at any value type I want. So if I want to see what the current demand is for each of these organizations and for each of these product types, I can look at that. Or I can look at the shortfall, where the problems are, how much of a problem product line A has versus product line B. Or I can look at, as we were just looking at before, labor and non-labor cost, or just labor cost. So I can see that my total cost for labor is 10 million, and by product line, I have each of those values. And of course, this is outlining a structure, so you can click the outline form and see the project detail below it. So in any case, you can see the model basically is to provide a simple way for the people who have the best information and the best knowledge to provide that data. So that would be the first level, line functional managers and the project managers for the project attributes. Consolidate that and provide it to anyone who has rights to look at this stuff with very useful, straightforward analysis that gives them some basis for making decisions. And even the color coding, the notion of allocation percent of demand, we can show that by rolled up on this view by whatever hierarchy we choose. And by the way, that's also very flexible because this hierarchy we're looking at can be changed, and you could put it in by project sponsor and get rid of business unit and move sponsor up, and then we could look at this by project sponsor and we could see the cost or any of these other value types. So there's a great deal more that our product Sept does, but what I've showed you now really illustrates the primary point, and I'd like to go back to that and revisit just one more time, and that is to say that resource planning is a different but highly related discipline to project management, and that the overall operational portfolio management within an organization requires both disciplines, and it requires different things from different people in the organization. And so it's quite appropriate for resource managers, line managers, to be allocating their resources to projects at a project level, where project managers take that allocation and allocate what they've got, what they've been given, to the tasks that make up the project. So this is a way of looking at the whole picture that's a little different from what I was doing for many years in my project management consulting and training days. And we have considerable evidence from major customers that this is a very, very effective approach to improving overall organization results. And as I said, our customers range in size from very, very large Bank of America unit, for instance, or Motorola or Medtronic, to rather small departments in organizations. And this kind of planning is required whenever you get beyond a very low level in terms of number of projects and number of people, because the keeping track of all this stuff and keeping it up to date is critically important. So what you want to have, for instance, in terms of keeping it up to date, as I said before, is a periodic forecast update, let's say monthly, or more often if your projects are shorter, where it's a look ahead for some number of periods, 3 to 5 to 6, something like that, so that when the periodic update occurs, the management team can come in here and look and see if all of a sudden they've got a bunch of red color here where they didn't have last period. They need to get an explanation of what's going on. And they will see that long before the problem hits them. Whereas if they're not getting that kind of regular periodic update and regular look at this kind of analysis, they won't know about it until the problem hits them, or maybe even long after, when the projects that are affected get into trouble. So that pretty much covers it. I'd like to open it up to questions at this point.
Okay, thank you, Peter. A lot of information there. There is one question that did come up, but before I ask that question, One of the things that you did point out briefly was in the area of prioritizing or the priority levels of projects. Can you address that in terms of, how do you determine project priority? I see you get some numbers there, 1, 200, 232, whatever. Understanding that in portfolio management, sometimes we do have to put projects on hold. We have to, delay them and so on, and shift resources from one project to another that might be a higher level priority. How does your product help you to determine that priority and manage that priority?
Well, the managing, of course, is a separate issue, and in fact, we've in a way addressed it because the calculation of this problem set, where there is insufficient supply to meet the demand, is based on a prioritized analysis. So that's the management piece. And if, for instance, one option would be to say, okay, if Oak has a problem at the priority of 2,500, let's make it a #1 priority, if that's justified, and see what happens, and then some other project will have a problem. And so you're constantly having to adjust as a function of the availability for resources to support in priority order your current portfolio. So that's the management piece. In terms of the identifying priorities, we do have several pieces of functionality. One is a simple scoring model, a very simple scoring model, and the other is a much more complex and robust scoring model. But the simple scoring model is here, where each project would come in and assess their project on these 7 parameters: strategic fit, commercial risk, technical risk, launch risk, development cost, net present value, and expected commercial value. And as most of us know who've been doing projects for a long time, you have, as a team, you get together and you scope out this stuff early in your project. And you come up with a ranking, a score, that you're willing to go before a portfolio review and defend. And once you come up with a score, the portfolio team establishes the weights for each of these parameters, and that results in a score, which is, by the way, should not be treated as the priority directly, but should be a contributor to the setting of the priority by the portfolio team. And the reason for that is the score may not change over time, but if you're very close to launch, a project with a lower score is not going to be delayed because there's a project with a much higher score, because you've already sunk all the money and you're about to go into a revenue situation. So anyway, that's our cut at this. There are some very sophisticated tools that can produce this data for you, and that would give you a more sophisticated way of establishing priority.
Okay, I think that's a pretty straightforward answer. I have a question from Joseph H., I believe, and it is actually, I think, a comparison type question. He's saying something like, can MSP, which is Microsoft Project, do the same thing? Example, what the resource utilization sheet does. So any comments or anything you can offer in connection with the difference between yours and, say, MS Project?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. In fact, when I was a project management consulting and training for IPS in the 90s, we actually tried to use macros with MSP to approximate this kind of prioritized resource analysis and so forth. And we're unable to do so. And there's a good reason for that. The project scheduling tools are addressing a fundamentally different problem. They're not really ideal for resource planning. What they're really good for is a first approximation to the total resource requirement for a project. But but I would recommend only for that you resource load your tasks maybe once or twice, but you don't try to do detailed resource planning based on your task level plans, because it's just terribly complicated and complex. There are some people who do it, and they are quite capable, and they do it quite successfully, but most people don't succeed at that. It produces bad numbers fundamentally. The better solution is to have the resource managers doing it. So in terms of the resource utilization picture, you can get something close to this, but what you don't get is you don't get this kind of optimization analysis. I mean, you do get, I forget what they call it in Microsoft Project, the leveling. But this is not leveling. This is identifying where there are gaps in the demand and whether any of the unused capacity can satisfy it. So the answer is you can get similar stuff to parts of this, but you cannot get the resource planning and especially the richness of the functionality we're providing out of MSP.
Okay, sounds like a good answer. I have another question here. I'm going to read this exactly the way it's written. I am not sure I fully understand the question, but let's see what it says here. Is there a possibility to measure the accuracy of the project manager demand and also to measure LMS or LM's staffing strategy? So I'm not sure what the LMS means, but to measure LMS staffing strategy and fulfillment rate. So I guess what the way I interpret this question would be, how well are you predicting the demand for the project managers, and is there a way to effectively measure how your strategy is working out as far as staffing goes?
Yes, well, there is actually a couple of things. And by the way, I'm assuming there was a typo there, and the person meant RM for resource manager, perhaps?
Possibly.
The resource manager staffing strategy? Or the line manager. Maybe that's it. Maybe it wasn't a typo. In any case, well, the first thing, the project team needs to get together and do their planning, because you're not going to get a reasonable effort forecast from a resource or line manager without the project team having done some work. Somebody has to do that, and there has to be communication between the project team and the line functional management. And however that occurs, it doesn't matter. It can be remote, it can be via document, it can be shout over the partition or whatever. But that communication occurs, and actually we have a function that allows project managers to directly input assignments for skills and make them into requests to the functional managers. So the project manager can be very specific if they want to. But in any case, the other piece of this, in order to get that comparison of accuracy and so on, is you need to have some ability to capture what we call baselines. So let's say we've gone through a baseline. I forget what project I was talking about before. Oh, network upgrade. Supposing we had gone through our phase gate review and we got these problems fixed, someone would come in here and go to the database menu and submit a baseline. And what that does is it saves all the project attributes, including schedule and goals and financials and everything, as well as the resource plan. And presumably, somehow or other, you may be tracking actuals, how much time people spend on each project. And if you have that, if you've been doing that, you have a module we call Baseline Forecast Actual, which allows you to see, and let me expose some more values here, table value options, project summary. So it allows you to see for each project the baseline, the current approved baseline, which would presumably be from the most recent phase gate, your current forecast, and your actuals, and by the way, you can also see the variation and deviations as well. And then at any point, you can come along and look at, for any subset or for the whole collection of projects, you can look at the comparison by chart of the baseline, the heavy black line, the current forecast, the green, and the actuals, this sort of orange color. And this is a pretty terrible organization because, as you can see, the forecast is tracking pretty closely to the baseline until out here, but their actuals are wildly off from their forecast. So they've got a problem here. These things should be tracking much more closely. And you can see for an individual project its baseline forecast and actual. So this is a way to assess the accuracy of forecasts over time. And it goes back to that point I made before, capture the history and use it.
Okay, I got one more question, and then we'll start to wrap up here. This is from Renee, and the question is, if the data that would feed this system resides in other systems, time, expense data, in our accounting system or project server, SharePoint, etc., can this be mined, used for this product?
Absolutely. We have many customers who are transferring data both ways. Some of them are transferring data both ways at the same time. They're taking data into PDWare from one system and taking that and the PDWare data out into another system. The notable examples of that are the large Bank of America unit I mentioned. Motorola is doing that, Medtronic. They're using it with HR systems, financial systems like Cognos, and with scheduling systems and so forth. And we do have an interface to Microsoft Project, so the dates that we were looking at on project data could well be imported from Project or Project Server or any of a host of other similar systems. And
okay.
We do time tracking too, of course.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, I think that answers Renee's question. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch back and start to close out the program. I hope everybody enjoyed the program. I think there's a lot of information that was presented. I just want to show the PDU information, which is right here. Let me just make that big enough so everybody can see here. This is a category B rather, PDU, and you get one PDU, and this is all the information that you need to post that PDU in your profile. Okay, and all this information will also be available on the International Project Management Day website. Those of you that know of colleagues that might be interested in seeing this particular program, we will record it, we will post it on the website. It usually takes a few days for that to happen, and we invite people to come back and visit and talk about it. And also, if you have more information or more questions for Peter, contact him directly at PDWare. Peter, what would be the best way for them to reach you?
The best way to reach me would be peter.heinrich@pdware.net.
Okay, and you're located in New York City, correct?
Yeah, well, just one note. I just noticed that we've moved, and the address is now incorrect. We should get the new address to you when you can post the new address on the website.
Okay, we'll post that.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to start to wrap up right now. Any last questions for Peter? I think that we got a pretty good view of not only the challenges associated with portfolio management, but a real nice deep look into what it takes to manage resources effectively. And I think that just about any organization out there, large or small, faces the challenge of shifting resources around and not really fully understanding utilization. And this particular tool certainly addresses those challenges. One of the reasons why we do these webinars is really to make sure that the project management community knows of these kinds of things that are available out there, that there are just so many different resources that can help make your project management responsibilities and issues that you face each day a little bit easier to work with. So take advantage of these kinds of things and let other people know about these webinars. We will continue to produce more webinars. If you know of someone who would like to present a webinar, or if you have a particular topic that you're interested in, just let us know. You can send an email to me at salatispmp@msn.com. So Peter, thank you very much for joining us. Thank everyone for being here. We appreciate your support. And make sure you claim your PDUs. And if you have any feedback, you can certainly send that directly to me. And again, I encourage you to get in touch with Peter directly with any other questions that you have or for a more detailed demonstration of the product. So I thank you very much. And Peter, again, my sincere thanks to you and everyone at PDWare.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care now.